It was always the Jags.
It's always the Jags. It's always the Jags.
Always the Jags.
Welcome into Always the Jags. It's your host, King Whale, and today we are discussing and grading the Jaguars draft class. And this, if you've ever seen any of my episodes before, I tend to be very harsh on the Jaguars draft class because for the most part, I don't really understand what we've been doing the last couple of years. You're going to hear a different tune this time. I'm going to just let you know out the gate. I'm trying, I probably should have been a little bit more subtle with how I graded our class, but I just can't be. I can't be because it's exciting. For the first time in a long time after the draft, Jaguars fans are excited. Now, let's remember, Trent Baalke, he wasn't the greatest GM, but he did have some solid drafts. Okay, let's look at 2021, right? We got Trevor Lawrence, our starting quarterback. We got Travis Etienne, who's been a starting running back. We also picked up a starting cornerback in Tyson Campbell and a starting left tackle, franchise left tackle in Walker Little. The only pick that we made that year that I was surprised by it not working out was Andre Sisco, because that was another one. He was a starting safety for a long time and ended up not working out. So that was 5 potential starters, at least guys that I thought that are still starting for us today that are, in the top of their league. Are they blue chip? I don't know. Walker Little might be in the top 15 in the left tackles in the NFL, maybe closer to the top 20, but he's pretty close. And, Trevor still has some work to get to blue chip. So none of them have reached that blue chip status. And that was kind of the knock on Trent Baalke. And I will say, the drafts that we had with Urban Meyer, the one draft that we had, that was a far more productive class than anything we had with Doug Peterson. Just being honest. Now, again, we had the same GM, but with Doug Peterson, 2022, we got Trayvon Walker and Devin Lloyd, who, again, haven't really achieved blue chip status. Aiden Hutchinson has, for a lot of accounts and purposes, been better than Trayvon Walker. I don't think it was a bad gamble, but, again, if you compare the two, who you could have had, Aiden Hutchinson was in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. Trayvon Walker was not that. And Aiden Hutchinson didn't have a guy like Josh Allen playing across from him. And then you had Devin Lloyd, who started off really well and then had some issues in coverage, and now he's just he's very solid against the run, but he's just not great in coverage. And then the rest of the draft, we have, some players that contribute here or there. 2023's draft, again, we got some players that can contribute. Again, Anton Harrison is our starting right tackle. Brenton Strange is now moving up to be our starting tight end. So we have a couple of players here and there that have been able to contribute. But again, 2021, we got 4 or 5 bona fide starters. And then, of course, 2024, the best thing about our draft class from last year was Brian Thomas Jr. coming out the gate and being incredible. And then we got some guys, Jerry Jones might play pretty well. I can't remember who we snagged in the second round of last year. But today we're looking at our draft from 2025, and I'm going to grade each pick. And I think later on in the summer, I might try to do a more comprehensive breakdown of each player. But for right now, I want to grade each pick and let you know my thoughts on it and let you know whether I think the Jaguars are set up for success or not. So let's dive right in. This is the first draft with James Gladstone as our general manager. Tony Baselli as the EVP of football operations, a move that I loved so much, and Liam Cohen as the head coach. So not number one overall. Sorry. In the first round, we took, of course, as all of you guys know, Travis freaking Hunter in a trade we executed with the Browns to move up from number 5 to number 2. Now, if you've watched any mock that I had, I said the Jaguars should predicate the free agency moves on potentially landing Travis Hunter, because a lot of places had him going as high as number 1 and as low as number 6 or 7. So I suggested that we make our free agency move based upon the fact that we might get Travis Hunter, and if we don't, we should just take Will Johnson instead, maybe trade back and get him. But instead, James Gladstone went ahead and traded up to get Travis Hunter after we made a slew of free agency moves that made me think we weren't planning on targeting Travis Hunter. Because even though we released Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, we brought in Diami Brown, we still have Gabe Davis, so it made me think maybe we're not. We definitely are, and we definitely got him. So that draft grade is an A. That is an A+, hands down. Did we have to give up a haul? I think I will have to keep it as an A. I wanted to say A plus so badly because it's such a beautiful move. But I'm going to give it an A for now because we did have to give up a haul. Now, again, here's the difference. We weren't trading up to draft a quarterback for a team that wants, like a lot of people are like, you gave a quarterback haul for a two-way player. Now, quarterbacks can't transform a franchise, but Travis Hunter could have a quarterback-like impact on our team. And again, the Browns were thinking about taking Travis Hunter. It is different. Like at first, it looks like it's too much, right? But the Jaguars weren't just saying, "Hey, let's trade up so we can beat, the Patriots and the Giants from taking Travis Hunter," because they both probably would have took him if he fell to them. They were saying, "Browns, I know you're interested in Travis Hunter," because the Browns made it very clear that they were, and they were saying, "Okay, we're gonna trade up to get Travis Hunter, obviously. You guys have to be okay with us." Basically, we traded for Travis Hunter, right? Like this wasn't really trading up because the Browns were going to take him. The Browns were going to take him. We could tell that they weren't interested in Shador. And out of all the players that would have went, maybe they would have taken Abdul Carter, but that wasn't really. Most people were thinking they were obsessed with Travis Hunter. They really want to jumpstart their offense to allow the quarterback to come in. They were going to take Travis Hunter. You just don't see two-way players in the NFL. So why not take a swing on him? So that was the entire rub. We had to convince the Browns, hey, let's do this. So to me, what would have made sense is to give up a third and a first from next year. Like that should have been enough to move up and grab him. But a third, maybe a third, a fourth, and a first from next year. But again, if you want to convince somebody, hey, don't take this guy because I'm going to give you this haul, I see why it had to be a second round pick, right? It was a steep cost, but again, most of the analysts aren't factoring in. There's a difference between when you're trading up to take somebody that the team you're trading with also wants, you have to give them more, right? Because usually you trade up to leapfrog somebody because they don't want that player. Like a few years ago, the Eagles leapfrogged a team. The Eagles traded with the Cowboys so they could leapfrog the Giants from taking somebody or someone like that. The Cowboys didn't really want that player. They didn't have a need for it. They didn't have him that high on their boards. The third round pick did it, right? The Browns were high on Travis Hunter, and he would be a Brown if James Gladstone did not pull this trade. So I don't think there's any way we could have paid less, and I think based upon that, we did pay the right amount. But it still was a haul, which is the only thing that prevents it from being an A+. Because did we overpay? Yeah, it's market demand. If you live in New York, you're overpaying for rent, right? Like that's market demand for where you're at. For based upon who Travis Hunter was and what people wanted for him, we did overpay, but that's because we had to. There was no other option in order to bring him into the building because the Browns were going to take him. That's just the market value and how it went. So, Travis Hunter, wide receiver, defensive back out of Colorado. Obviously, he's going to be the talk. James Gladstone's entire draft class is going to haul on whether Travis Hunter how good does he become at wide receiver and defensive back. And if he becomes a blue chip prospect at both positions, this will be perhaps one of our greatest drafts of all time. And James Gladstone will be the GM for the next 10 years. Doesn't matter because of this move that he made right here. And we will come out the winners and the Browns will look like big, stupid losers, basically. Because Travis Hunter, blue chip means top 10 at your position. If he can play top 10 wide receiver and defensive back, even if he's number 10, we don't need him to be the best running back, best cornerback, best wide receiver. Blue chip is just top 10, right? And I think he'll start the year as about top 15 in each category. If he can ascend to that level, Brian Thomas Jr. is already pretty much top 10. I mean, you could probably name 10 receivers that are better than him, probably, but by the end of next year, he'll be caught up to them. So with Travis Hunter Jr. ascending, if he ascends to that level, he'll cement the legacy, right? And the pick will be worth everything that we paid for it. Because now when we extend him, we're not going to pay him a wide receiver and a cornerback salary on top of each other. He's not going to get like $80 million a year. He's going to become the highest paid cornerback and the highest paid wide receiver for sure. So like right now, I think the highest paid wide receiver is Jamar Chase at $40 million. So Travis Hunter in 5 years might get $45 million. But compared to teams that be paying their cornerback $40 million or $20 million and their wide receiver $40 million, it'll still be a bargain for us. Also, it saves us a roster spot, which I think a lot of people don't realize. On a 53-man roster, we've got an extra spot because he plays two positions at the same time. It's not just like an offensive lineman who can also play tackle. He still takes up a roster spot. Because of Travis Hunter, we can carry one less wide receiver or one less cornerback, or like, so like we can put in an extra wide receiver because he's also a cornerback, or an extra cornerback because he's also a wide receiver. So there's so many uses. And my number one caveat is a lot of the rumors are saying that we're going to start him as a wide receiver to kind of ease him into the game. I'm not going to say that's a mistake, but I don't think it's the right call. Because from what we've seen over and over throughout the NFL, it is so much easier to transition to offense to defense in the NFL. That's just the way it is. Defensive players rarely come into the league and start dominating from day one. It takes time. Defenses are a little bit more complicated, a little bit more coverage-wise, and there's not as much flowers thrown to the defense. I mean, you got fantasy football and all these things. So offense is a little bit easier to come in, pick up the system, and start contributing. So we have so much, offensive explosion. So they want to start, and I think that's why they want to start Travis Hunter at wide receiver, because it's a little bit easier to pick up than it is cornerback in the NFL. Because again, in the NFL, you have complicated coverage, you have zones. As a wide receiver, you're trying to get open and be where the quarterback is expecting you to be. As a cornerback, you have to anticipate the quarterback and the wide receiver. What are they both going to do? So it's a little bit more complicated. You got to know who's blitzing, who's not blitzing, who's in the right spot. There's a whole bunch of things. But that's why I think he needs to go to defense first. Because first of all, we need a lockdown cornerback more than we need a wide receiver. And if starting him at cornerback, if whatever he starts at allows him to be better at, we need him to be a cornerback more than we need him to be a wide receiver. Because I feel like we have pieces in place that will help him move along as wide receiver, right? We don't have as many pieces in place for defense. Jordan Lewis is probably going to start nickelback, and Jarrian Jones looks like he's moving out to the boundary, and he's going to be our backup for Tyson Campbell and Travis Hunter. So I think what they're planning on doing is starting the season with Jarrian Jones playing outside one side and Tyson Campbell playing the other. My thing is, I think it's good that we have Jarrian Jones because Tyson Campbell gets hurt a lot, and I want him to stay around for a long time, but we paid him like a cornerback who's always available. But he gets hurt a lot, and when he's hurt, his play suffers too. So having him and Jarrian Jones is nice because Jarrian Jones can step in when he's hurt. But we need Travis Hunter to be ready to play cornerback. Because at some point this year, Tyson Campbell's probably going to get hurt. Let's just be real. So when Tyson Campbell gets hurt, we need Travis Hunter to know all the coverage and everything and be able to come in. That's why I think it'd be better if he was already playing defensive back and he can maybe play number 2 and have Tyson Campbell play number 1 cornerback as long as he's healthy. And then let him get used to that and then maybe move him over to number 1 while he's picking up the wide receiver playbook little by little. Because to me, that's the most important position that we need filled, cornerback. Because if we look at the wide receiver side, we've got Parker Washington can play in the slot. Now, like I said, I kind of wish we had kept Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram because that would have made this a little bit easier, but it's okay. We know Parker Washington can play in the slot. He can do what Christian Kirk did. Maybe not as well, but he can do it. Brian Thomas Jr. is only going to continue to ascend, and as he continues to stretch defenses, that's just going to open things up for Parker Washington in the slot. And then we have our other X-receiver, which is going to presumably be Travis Hunter, but it could also be Gabe Davis or Dynami Brown. You have 2 guys that are ready, that can play, that are started. And again, Gabe Davis is probably not going to be on the roster for very much longer, depending on how well Travis Hunter does. But Dynami Brown is very fast. He's a holdover in spots, right? And then some plays we can take him out and put Travis Hunter in. Let him play a quarter at wide receiver a couple of times. And then let him play 2 quarter. So eventually he'll start to pick up the wide receiver. But I think it's much easier for him to pick up the wide receiver portion than it is to pick up the cornerback portion. It's kind of like, this is a weird analogy, but like I play saxophone and I also play clarinet. Now, like I'm much better at saxophone than I am at clarinet, but had I picked up clarinet first, I would have been much better at clarinet. And I don't think I would be quite as good at saxophone, but the difference wouldn't be so high, right? So like I wouldn't be as good at saxophone as I am at clarinet right now. I would be a little bit worse at saxophone maybe a lot worse even. But I'd be way better at clarinet, just because clarinet, when you pick it up, it translates to saxophone really well. But saxophone is hard to translate to clarinet. And you'd have to understand the fingerings to know exactly what I mean by that. But basically what I'm trying to say is I think it's going to be easier to translate your cornerback to being a wide receiver than wide receiver to being a cornerback. So that is my suggestion. I think he needs to start on defense full time from day one and treat himself like a cornerback, because most people believe he's a better cornerback anyway. And if you notice too, in college, 2023, he was okay. He wasn't the best cornerback, but he was playing really well. And then 2024 is when he really brought it together as cornerback, and he became a lot better. So I think wide receiver, like, he might be a better corner just in instincts and how you see him play, but wide receiver might come a little bit more naturally to him, right? So that's why I think he should play defense full time, and then he should move to wide receiver as well. So we'll see what happens, of course, but that's just my 2 cents. I know I still got a whole draft class to grade, and I went on for a long time about that. So I might split these up into individual rounds, but we'll see later on. In the meantime, let's move on. So that grade, of course, gets an A for round 1 for Travis Hunter, the wide receiver / defensive back out of Colorado. Jaguars made a unicorn splash move. This is going to put butts in seats. I might even move to Jacksonville just so I could see Travis Hunter more often. Like, that's what I mean by put butts in seats and ignite the franchise. This was a chess move, a brilliant move by James Gladstone. Moving on to the third round. Third round, we have Caleb Ransaw, defensive back out of Tulane. We took him number 88 overall. And at first, when I saw this pick, I was super confused because the newscasters showed him as a nickel. And I was like, we have so many nickelbacks. Like, we had Darnell Savage was signed to play nickel. And then we drafted Jerrion Jones. And then we just signed Jordan Lewis. I'm like, we have 3 nickels. Why do we draft a 4th one? And then I realized, so he played nickel last year, but he's also played a lot of safety. And I think their plan is to have him play safety for us, which makes a lot more sense because I was like, we need a safety way more than we need a nickel. And if he can do both, that just means he can apply those concepts in both ways. And if someone gets hurt, we can swap around our roster to make sure we have the best players on the field as well. So there's nothing wrong with versatility. The only thing this pick is going to be compared to is Xavier Watts, who didn't go until 6 picks later to the Falcons. So for right now, I have the Caleb Ransaw pick as an A for one reason. Because originally we were picking at 70, and then James Gladstone traded back to 88 with the Lions, and he picked up 2 future third rounders in the process. That is a master class. He moved back 18 spots and picked up 2 third rounders from the Lions. That means next year we have 1 second and 3 third rounders. And then 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. We have 3 third rounders next year. I'm going to say that as much as possible because that was the most brilliant trade I've ever seen pulled off by a Jaguars GM. We fleeced. We absolutely fleeced, and we still got the guy that we wanted. The guy that we needed, honestly. And especially with the next pick. So that's what makes this an A. Now, I think Caleb Ransaw is... It's funny because if you look at this, it's just going to be compared to Xavier Watts for the rest of his entire career, probably. I'll be looking at because Xavier Watts is one of the top-rated safeties who is not like a first rounder, but most people graded him as a guy you could get maybe in the 2nd round and he could start. And in all my mock drafts, he was always taken in the 2nd round. So like if I didn't get him in the 2nd round, I wasn't going to get him. So I kind of had wrote off getting him once we took Travis Hunter and gave up our 2nd. But Xavier Watts but Caleb Ransaw has something very valuable in recovery speed. So that means because he's fast. So if you're fast and someone makes a move on you and beats you, if you have recovery speed, you can speed up to catch him. Now, of course, it would be better to just not get caught and to stay with him, right? But having that recovery speed is nice because you can turn around and catch up to them. So I think the thing is Xavier Watts is more of the instincts to where he won't get beat as much and he can stay with somebody. And Caleb Ransaw, he has the recovery speed to do it, but sometimes he can get beat. And so it all just depends on his development, right? So this is going to be an A for now because I think you can teach how to not get beat, how to be a little bit more focused, more disciplined, things like that on the football field and understand coverages. You can't beat recovery speed as much because recovery speed requires, you can't really teach recovery speed. It requires acceleration, and speed is just a thing that some guys have. Like you can train harder in the work room and in the weight room and all this stuff, but sometimes speed is just a thing that guys have. And so that's a trait that, we've been targeting since Urban Meyer came in. His thing was whole speed kills. And he's been targeting speedy guys ever since he came in. And James Gladstone is continuing that with Caleb Ransaw. So I think if we can develop his skills and his ability to read out coverage, I mean, he could even compete and start for safety. Because I think right now our starting safeties will be Eric Murray and Darnell Savage. So I think he can beat out at least one of them. He's also very good at playing to the box. And again, if you've got great speed, that's helpful in run support, right? Because he's a good tackler, great open field tackler. And if he can sniff out a run play and knife his way through the defense and get there faster than Xavier Watts can, then that'll be even better. So he could play free safety or strong safety, whichever one seems more applicable to him. I would love for him to become a great free safety, so that way, like if somebody needs help or something, he'll have the speed to go up and help. Or run over. And just to give because people might be wondering, well, how fast? Brian Thomas Jr. ran a 4.33, if I'm not mistaken, at the combine. Caleb Ransaw ran a 4.33. 4.34, sorry. He ran a 4.34. So Caleb Ransaw and Brian Thomas Jr. could almost match each other in the race, right? So imagine having a player having one of the fastest wide receivers in the NFL and then having a safety who can run just as fast. So, and again, those instincts and that reading coverages and things like that, we can teach that. Speed can't really be taught. So this will be an A. And like I said, it just depends on, the only way this grade will come down is if Xavier Watts becomes a better player than him, because he was on the board and we passed on him in favor of Caleb Ransaw. Next, we have Wyatt Malum, offensive lineman out of West Virginia. We took it round 3 at number 89 overall. So I think this was the Vikings pick that we had, and then we traded back to get the or this might have been, I don't know if this is the one that was the trade or not. I'm not sure. But this one also gets an A no matter what. Because we had 2 third rounders, of course, when we got Brian Thomas Jr. by trading back, which still amazing. By trading back, we got a couple of third rounders for this year, so we were able to use 1 trade back and net 2 more next year. It's like, I know I keep going back to it, but it's like, guys, the power of a third rounder. A fourth rounder brought in Joe Thuney. So, like, if we're making moves next year and we're kind of crushing it, that third rounder could be what we need to bring in, like, a crazy defensive tackle or just something like that. Like, if we are doing well when we get the trade deadline, one of those third rounders, like, that's the kind of a trade capital that we could use, or we could use one of our fourth rounders knowing that we got 3/3. It's such great capital, especially because we don't have a first draft next year. So like that trade back, it makes the Travis Hunter trade like worth it too, because you can find diamonds in the rough, stuff like that. And we did all that just by trading back. It's not even like we had to give up or get out of the third round completely. All we did was trade back in it. So like if you look at it, we gave up, I think, based upon the picks, 2 picks for Travis Hunter. 1 first round next year and a second round this year. And then just trading back in the third round, we got those 2 selections back. Now, yes, they're not as high, not as valuable, but we still have the ability to take the same number of players. So we can find players, develop them, and that's what good teams do. I mean, you guys all know this. Draft and develop. That's the kind of team that we want to be. So I'm going to keep raving over that trade because it was just that good. But anyway, let's talk about Wyatt Malum. Wyatt Malum is another guy that I thought you kind of needed to have in the second round. So, like, whenever I did my mock drafts, if Travis Hunter fell to me, I was like, great. Second round, I got to choose between Xavier Watts or Wyatt Malum. And it was always really tough. If Travis Hunter didn't fall to me, I could trade back. Sometimes I would pick up a second, and I would grab Will Johnson around like 11 or 15, whoever traded with me. And then in the second round, I would pick up Wyatt Malum and Xavier Watts. So for him to be here in the third round is an absolute steal because he's a guy that can come in and compete for a guard job right away. So again, this is an A. So far, straight A's. The only reason why it's not an A plus, like I said, the only reason why Caleb Ransaw is not an A plus is because Xavier Watts was out there, and I don't know if he'll be better. Only reason why Wyatt Malum is not an A plus. Currently, I think James Gladstone has more faith in Robert Hainsey than I do. Now, I haven't seen him. I got to rewatch that Saints game and the Buccaneers game because he specifically mentioned it. But Robert Hainsey is the guy that we signed to be our starting center. And of course, he lost his starting job in last year with the Buccaneers because Graham Barton took over. And when Graham Barton took over, their run game really took off. Really took off. So, like, if we had signed Drew Dahlman, you know, a guy that's just known as a bruiser in the run game, I would feel a lot differently. Now, James Gladstone watched that game with the Buccaneers and the Saints when Graham Barton was out and felt like that was enough to be like Robert Hainsey is going to be our guy, our center, and he's going to dominate on the field. He did enough to make him feel that way. Again, I have to watch the tape and I have to see it, right? And so I think he has more faith in Robert Hainsey and I have more faith in Ezra Cleveland than he does because I probably would have taken Jared Wilson, who's an athletic center. Again, to me, the best choice would have been to sign Drew Dahlman. That would have been the number one choice. But I would have taken maybe Jared Wilson, who ended up going to the Patriots just 6 picks later at 96, 95 or something like that. Because he's like the most athletic center in the draft. He was the best center in the draft, probably by far. And this would give him a chance to wait, learn, and then potentially take over. So now I don't think that Wyatt Malum, I think Wyatt Malum, though, is a better player than Jared Wilson. Just looking at what they've been able to do, Wyatt Malum is a better player. So if we're drafting just best players overall, it makes more sense to take Wyatt Malum. And if he takes over for Ezra Cleveland, great. There's lots of things we could do. If Ezra Cleveland and Wyatt Malum are both better than Robert Hainsey, we could convert one of them to center, and if they're both better at center than Robert Hainsey is, well, that'll be fine. And I think there's a good chance that if Wyatt Malum ends up converting to center or something, or maybe if Ezra Cleveland converts to center, they could be better than Jared Wilson. So again, that pick just kind of depends on how well he does. But Wyatt Malum to me was a steal. He was a second round potential starting. Like he's a guy that's going to compete for a starting job, and we got him in the third round. That is a steal in my book and a masterclass again by James Gladstone. I know I said I love this guy going in, but I love this guy. This is awesome. So moving on. Next, we got Bashul Tutin, a running back out of Virginia Tech. You'll have to apologize if I mispronounce his name. In the fourth round at number 104 overall. This one I will probably rate as a B, maybe a B plus, because again, insanely fast, can probably do a lot of things out of the backfield, and he'll probably end up replacing Keelan Robinson or Dearness Jones in our backfield, not Dearness Jones, Dearness Johnson. Sorry, he'll probably end up replacing Dearness Johnson in our backfield as our third running back. The only reason why, and a lot of people have been labeling it as a steal because he's the fastest running back in the draft. We got him in fourth round, and he's the fastest running back in the draft. We got him in the fourth round. Some people had him going as high as the second or the third. So it feels like a really big steal for us because there's a lot of things that he can do as well. And my only thought process is, I don't know if we needed a running back because we've got two. But I feel like this is kind of, I'm not going to say it's the writing on the wall for Travis Etienne, but, if this guy really starts to take off, I think there's a good chance that Travis Etienne either becomes a trade chip before the deadline. We did pick up his fifth-year option, which I think was the right call, but he either becomes a trade chip towards the deadline or he ends up, we just let him hit free agency and maybe we don't end up re-signing him. We'll see. But he kind of brings that same skill set as Travis Etienne. And I still like Travis Etienne in our team. I like that he gets to play with Trevor Lawrence, quarterback from Clemson. But I also know that you sometimes you got to replace players in the draft with cheap picks. The only thing is, like I said, last year we took Tank Bigsby in the third round. And he ended up playing much better this year. But I'm also like, man, I hope we didn't pass on somebody else in order to get this player that maybe could have impacted our team a little bit more. Because again, our running back depth chart is pretty solid. I mean, I feel like we've got two really good starting running backs that can make some move. They just need a little bit of a better offensive line to work with. So now I don't think there was a center worth taking. Like I would have rated this pick a lot worse if Jared Wilson had still been available, but I don't think there was a center worth taking. I don't really think there was. I do think this was the best player available kind of pick. Um, I just wonder, who would that have ended up being, right? Like, could we have taken someone on the defensive line? 'Cause this is a very deep draft for the defensive line. But I believe Ashton Jeloit was already taken. There was one guy who I would have taken who ended up going to the Chargers. I can't think of his name, but he was an edge player, Kyle Kennard, out of South Carolina. And I think he was still available in the 4th round. I probably would have ended up going with him. But again, we ended up taking the fastest running back in the draft. Not a bad haul. I'm not going to knock it. I'm just going to give it a B+. Next, at 107 overall, we have Jack Kaiser, the linebacker out of Notre Dame. And this one's going to end up getting a B, probably minus. Now, again, not to say it's not a good, like, when I first looked at these picks and they were first happening, I was like, what's happening right now? Why are we taking these guys? We have like 8 linebackers. Why do we need another one? But the more I thought about it, the better that the pick seemed in retrospect, because right now, it also depends on the kind of defense that we want to play. Because I don't know if Anthony Campanile is going to like using 2 linebackers or 3. It might depend, depending on, what he wants. So Jack Kaiser and Devin Lloyd is approaching the final. We didn't pick up his 3rd-year option, which also I should make another video based upon that. But we didn't pick up his 5th-year option. So Devin Lloyd may become a free agent next year, which, again, I do kind of agree with. I don't like Devin Lloyd's not a bad player. I like him a lot. But he was going to cost us $14 million in 2026. I don't know if we can justify that for him. I don't know if we can justify a long-term extension. Now, if he puts it all together, great, keep him, right? And we will give him whatever he needs. And maybe this is the fuel he needs to know that, like, hey, they need to see a little bit more in order for us to really move to the next level. But Jack Kaiser could potentially end up replacing him. He could end up replacing Devin Lloyd in our lineup. The only thing is, we already kind of have a guy who's made tackles all over the field in Ventrell Miller. And he kind of has been replacing Devin Lloyd, right? And he's been in the right spot. And Foye Oluokun hasn't had to line him up. And so I think it's going to be hard to take him off the field, right? Because he came in and just started making tackle after tackle after tackle. And I criticized the Ventrell Miller pick very heavily a few years ago. So now we're at the Jack Kaiser pick where we're taking another linebacker. And don't forget, we still have Chad Muma somewhere on that roster, right? And I think he mainly plays special teams now, but it's like, so we've got 5 linebackers who all compete for a starting job. Like, like I said, in this right here, could we maybe take some defensive line edge depth, someone that we need? Now, again, these grades are also a little bit lighter and softer because the Jaguars made a move that I thought was brilliant that I will discuss in another video. Well, no, I'll just discuss it right now. We signed Emmanuel Ogbah to a 5-year, not 5-year, a $5 million deal to be our 3rd edge rusher, which is perfect, absolutely perfect. He can play inside and out. He's the perfect 3rd edge rusher to complement Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. He's exactly what I wanted us to try to get in the draft. And now he's a guy, he makes the Travis Hunter pick make sense, and he makes the fact that we didn't end up drafting that many defensive linemen make sense, because he's a guy that we can work in, and this solidifies Eric Armstead is moving back to defensive tackle. For the love of God, move back to defensive tackle. And so he's going to replace Eric Armstead on the defensive end depth. So this is beautiful. This is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. He might be my favorite signing of the entire time because we put a veteran in there that knows what he's doing and could possibly help young guys come up. So I think Jack Kaiser he's not a bad pick necessarily, but I'm also like, he's known as a thumper, right? And it's the same kind of thing with every linebacker that I see. Struggles in coverage, but is a hard-hitting thumper. And it's like, it's great that we can stop the run, but I kind of feel like right now we have a lot of linebackers who struggle in coverage. Like, Foye Oluokun is not the greatest cover man. Devin Lloyd has struggled in coverage a lot, and that was one of the things he was good at in college, and we were hoping he would take on. But he's just had trouble getting lined up, and Foye Oluokun is constantly had to tell him where to be in your spot. And I think now he's starting to pick it up, but again, he kind of struggles in coverage. Ventrell Miller, he's often in the right spot, but he can struggle in coverage. He's much better at just thumping and hitting guys and stopping the run and knifing through the defense and getting that run stop, which is important. But also, linebackers sometimes got to cover tight ends and wide receivers and doing slots. And so to pick up another linebacker, to me, who also struggles against coverage, is a little bit redundant, even though it might end up serving a purpose in the future. Because like I said, if Jack Campanelli likes to play with 3 linebackers, he might want Jack Kaiser, Ventrell Miller, and Foye Oluokun for next year if Devin Lloyd ends up leaving at the end of this year. So it's good to have some insurance. But also, because Chad Muma, I don't think we're going to end up re-signing him unless we do like a special special teams deal. So again, if it was a linebacker that was really strong in coverage, I would have loved that because I felt like that would have balanced out well with what we currently have. But Jack Kaiser, again, I won't knock it too hard because I understand what we're doing, but he's going to have to be a B-. Next, we have Jalen McLeod in the 6th round. We took him at 194 overall. And he plays defensive. He's listed as linebacker, but I believe he plays edge, outside linebacker. So this pick is going to be an A. You know, he had a solid season. I think 6 or 8 sacks, which, again, if you go into smaller schools and getting a lot of sacks, you know, people say the competition isn't as high. You know, it's understandable. And it's not like I would rather have a guy that went to a bigger school and had less sacks compared to a guy to a smaller school that had more sacks. But to me, if you've proven that you can beat somebody and get those sacks, in order to get sacks, you got to beat your offensive lineman. And to me, that's a lot easier to work with than someone that hasn't proven they can consistently beat offensive linemen. 8 sacks means you can consistently beat offensive linemen. Now, granted, you probably got to get better and improve in that skill a little bit more, but it's nice to see production. It's nice to see a productive player coming in. This is not potential. He's got production. He just needs, can he take his game to the next level? And we'll see. So he's a guy, I think he could probably make the roster, honestly. So we'll give this pick an A. I think it's going to work out pretty well for us. And I think he's going to be a great linebacker. Next, we have Ryan Lane III, safety, Navy, round 6, number 200 overall. And this pick, I'll probably end up giving it like a C+. It's not like I think it's a bad pick. It's just it depends on how you see Caleb Ransaw. Because again, I was beating the drum for us to get a safety. And it's funny, I actually had us double dipping at safety multiple times in many mock drafts, but I had us taking Malachi Moore in the 6th round. He ended up going in the 4th round to the Jets, which does make sense because I don't know why he kept falling to the 6th round, because he's a safety from Alabama, a starting safety from Alabama. And like, if anybody knows anything, you want Alabama defensive players on your team. So that was, I always wonder why he was falling so far. So for us to pick up another safety, again, C+, probably somewhere in that range. I mean, again, we've got, it builds up our depth. I don't think he'll end up making the roster though, because we've got Daniel Thomas back there. I think Caleb Ransaw is going to be listed as a safety. We'll have Eric Thomas and we'll have Darnell Savage. So we've got some guys that can start, and adding him in to kind of up the competition, you know, make sure Caleb Ransaw knows that, like, hey, you've got a guy who's nipping on your heels. This feels like a pick that's going to end up making some of our other safeties better rather than like a pick that could be a contributor. But hey, that works, you know, like for a 6th round pick, if that works, if he's competing to make a roster spot and you make someone better because of it, we'll take it. So, so it'll be a C+, because like I said, I don't think he'll end up making the roster, but it's still fine. If you ask me like what I would have rather done here, I probably would have, I don't know if I would have taken a wide receiver because I think we're pretty good there. I think I would have rather dipped to like defensive line and taken somebody who could maybe stand up from those guys, because we still have like, I think Mason Smith and Eric Armstead are going to start, but when we've got guys in the back like Tyler Lacey, like I would have rather had some more defensive tackle competition added in right there. That's probably what I would have went at number 200. But like I said, we got this guy. Jonah Monham in the 7th round. Now we're moving on to the 7th round with Jonah Monham, center out of Southern California, number 221 overall. This one I have rated as an A. And honestly, if it'll make the Wyatt alum pick look a lot better. I think Jonah Monheim should have no problem beating out. Um, why is his name escaping me? Our former starting center, Luke Fortner. Sorry about that. He should have no problem beating out Luke Fortner for the backup center job behind Robert Hainsey. And like I said, if he learns and he's thrust into a couple of games and he ends up starting somehow, like I think he has the traits and tools needed to become a starter, at least a good backup for us. And so if that happens and we have Wyatt Malum and Jonah Monheim starting on our offensive line next year, that was a fantastic draft. But I think he'll be a good backup. He should beat out Luke Fortner. And like I said, when you take guys like this, it's all about developing them and seeing if they can become starters in the future. Last, at number 236 overall, in round 7, we have LaQuint Allen, running back out of Syracuse. I'll give this one a B+ again as well. He does a lot of things out of the backfield. He's very versatile, not as fast as Byshul Tootin, but he can kind of play that fourth running back role. He'll be directly competing with Keelan Robinson, because I think Byshul Tootin has a pretty good lock to make the roster, but he'll be competing with Allen will be competing with Keelan Robinson to see who gets that final running back spot if we end up taking 4, which is my prediction. So if we have 4 running backs and he's competing, like I said, he can do a lot of things out of the backfield. He could be helpful on special teams. Again, to me, would I rather see more running back competition or would I rather see more defensive line competition? I probably would have went defensive line, see if there's maybe another diamond in the rough there at defensive tackle. Because with these last 6 through 7 round picks, it's you kind of you're looking for guys that can compete, but you're also looking for maybe, like I said, diamond in the rough, a guy who maybe went to a smaller school or just didn't have as much, or once he gets on the NFL field and starts learning from different guys from your coaching staff, he can really start to take off. That's what I'd be looking for here. And I think we need a guy to take off at defensive tackle more than we need a guy to take off at running back. And that's just my overall thought. Same thing with the safety pick. I think we need a guy having a guy take off at safety would be great for us because our safety play was horrendous last year. But I'd want to see that defensive tackle really take off because, again, we did draft a defensive back safety in the 3rd round. So that's my pick. If you average out my score, I don't know what it would be. I think it would probably end up being around a B+. But my grade for this draft class is an undisputed A. James Gladstone's first draft class to me was a masterclass. The highlights are getting Travis Hunter and getting 2 future 3rd round picks. Might not seem like that big of a deal, but it is huge. Whether we keep them or we trade it for a veteran, it is huge to have that kind of capital in our back pocket. So I'm extremely excited. I think James Gladstone absolutely cooked with this draft. Let me know your thoughts. Who do you think? What do you think your grades are for the draft class and for each individual player? I'll probably end up breaking this down into rounds when I post it on YouTube if you're listening to it right now for the podcast and you want to see the video version. And maybe I'll try to add in some highlights so you can see the kind of players that I'm talking about. But let me know your thoughts. Let me know how you're feeling about the draft, how you're feeling about the Jaguars in general. And don't ever forget, it was always the Jags.